Hey Artnerds! So, over the years we have used Posca markers quite a few times here on this channel. I thought it would be kind of cool to do an overview with you guys today. So recently I did a live stream where together we painted a really cute poison dart tree frog on black Strathmore mixed media paper, and my green started to die, and then my teal started to die, and my blue started to die, and I realized it was time for me to replace my original set of Poscas. I'd had those Poscas for several years. They'd been quite faithful companions, but they were ready to go. It was time to replace them. So I ordered the 36 color set from Amazon, and it arrived today, and I wanted to kind of share them with you guys and also just kind of give a general overview of Posca markers. So I know that Poscas are a very popular marker option. Several other channels have talked about Poscas. I'm not going to pretend I'm the only one. I've done quite a bit of research on these markers, and the site will not tell you what they are made of, but I do think they are tempera paint. There are other paint markers on the market that use acrylic paint, and you can even kind of make your own with the FW pens, but these use water soluble while still wet tempera paint, and then they will dry fairly waterproof but matte, and I'll show you guys that in a minute. They're available in several different body sizes, so let me grab some of those to show you guys. So I have here most of the different body types available in Posca, minus the larger chisel tip that's designed to cover larger areas. So they're mostly available in bullet tips, but there are a few other options available, and they're available in a few different sizes. So we have here kind of the large chunky boy, the PC 5mm. It's bullet shaped, and you can get lines from 1.8 to 2.5 millimeters depending on how you turn and hold the pen. We have the smaller PC 3mm, which gives you a tip shape or a tip size of 0.9 to 1.3 millimeters. You can see that's actually much smaller. We have this is the same thing, it's the PC 3M, but this one is not metallic, so the 3M denotes metallic or glittery. We also have the PC 1mm, so much smaller, much finer tip. We have the Posca brush tips. I actually don't really like these. I have a few of them, but I don't really care for them. I find that they have ink flow problems. And then we have the much smaller sort of plastic tip Poscas. So Poscas are available in a wide array of colors as well as special effect colors. You have several different fluorescent colors. So I have here a very bright yellow and a neon pink. Those really stand out. They're also available in gold, silver, copper, and I want to say a bronzy color. And then they're also available in glitter colors. I'm going to swatch some of these for you guys so you guys can kind of see what we're working with. So this is the Japanese release of the glitter, and then this is the American or the Western release of the glitter. Pretty much the same, just slightly different styling. And what's really cool about Poscas is they can mark on almost anything. I have tutorials here on the channel where we've used them on canvas. We've used them on wooden. So I used to do wooden plaques with Posca, and I do some of my wooden charms with Posca markers. You can use them on glass. We've painted pumpkins using Posca markers, and I'll make sure I'll link all of those in the description for you guys if you're interested in checking out more. And they work really well on paper, so they're a very flexible material. In fact, graffiti artists also enjoy using them. When I work with Poscas, if I'm using it for a daily use sort of scenario, I apply a sealant. In fact, I use Krylon's UV gloss coat just to make sure it's not going anywhere. So here's an example of Posca on wood, and it's actually on a spray painted surface, and then all the lettering was done with Posca. Here's an example of Posca on plastic. This was actually sealed with a matte coat. This was sealed with a sparkly glitter coat, but you have to find just the right angle to do it. And then this is an example of one of my wooden charms that has Posca on it, and then it was sealed with Krylon glossy coat. So it's actually pretty flexible, and they're very easy to use. So you're not just limited to paper or canvas with these. So here are some example of acrylic paint pens. They're really not that different from Posca. They feature a liquid acrylic with a shaker ball inside. Many of them have a pump action mechanism to advance the ink or the acrylic inside. Many of them can be refilled. This is a Liquitex one. So the Liquitex ones match with other colors in the Liquitex line. This one is also a Liquitex one. There's also the Molotow markers. Those also mix with colors in the Molotow line, and they're designed to be refilled. So they even have a little gauge on the side, which lets you see how much is still in them. Very similar pump action mechanism. This one actually has never been used before. And I think with the Molotow, you can actually buy different tips. Here's a smaller one for all. Here is a metallic one for all. I have a lot of these that I've never used before. And then Molotow also makes double-sided ones. So one side is the fine tip, and then one side is the much broader tip. So you basically get two markers in one. So these all use liquid acrylic, whereas these use tempera paint. Most of these, if you unscrew not the cap, but the collar right here, you can refill the pen. So even the double-sided one has markings on it to help you tell how full they are. With Posca markers, I know there are some artists who will refill these. I've actually never tried refilling them myself because they use a liquid tempera paint, and that's just not a game I want to play with my art supplies. So the Posca website includes a lot of this information. They do have a fairly large color range. It's like 56 different colors, including the metallics and the glitter and the fluorescents. The site does say they are water-based, which is another reason why I think they are tempera. Years ago, I wrote to the site, or I wrote to Posca asking what paint material they use. They never got back to me, so I can't definitively say, and their site still doesn't definitively say what they're using. I know some artists will refill their Poscas with acrylic. I wouldn't do that. Acrylics have plasticizers in them. That's why they dry so permanent, and a plasticizer basically makes it a little bit stretchy. It kind of changes the working properties and the reactivation properties of these markers. So generally, I try not to mix materials in the same pen. I would just replace the markers. But that's just me. You are welcome. You are encouraged to explore and try all sorts of different things. Experiment with your art supplies. The site also doesn't list refills for these. If it did list refills, I would definitely tell you guys so that you could refill your markers and get the most out of them. And I'm trying to get that unscrewed, and I'm having some trouble doing it. I do actually have a dried out version of that marker, so I'm going to go grab it and see if we can get that unscrewed. Okay, so this is my basically dead Posca marker. It's going to take a little bit of elbow grease. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that one off camera, but I want to point out some of the ways that Poscas are very similar to other paint markers. So in order to advance the paint, you do push down on the tip. When they're starting to kind of die on you, they will bleed like that. That's a pretty common thing. So I'm going to hold that over to the side and clean that up. So I asked my very handsome assistant Joseph to try and get the cap off me because I could not for love or money. We even put a rubber band on it to add some friction, and neither of us could get the cap off. So if you are arthritic, if you have weaker hands like me, if you have smaller hands, if you're a kid or a teen, you will probably have trouble getting this unscrewed. And this would be how I would think you would refill these if you were able to refill them. So I have here a pair of Copic tweezers. We're just going to use that to see if the nib is removable. And it does actually look like you could just flip that nib around. I'll go ahead and get my hands dirty here and just place it in. Whoa! You see that? That's how you know this is on its way out. It just gets really prone to leaking and to creating a huge mess. And those of you who hung out with me during the Poison Dart Tree Frog video saw that in action. And I misspoke a little bit earlier. It's actually 59 colors, not 56 colors, with 8 metallic, 6 fluorescent, and 8 glitter colors available. So what I want to do for you guys today, because I love you so much, I want to go ahead and swatch the 36 open stock Posca colors I got from Amazon. And I'm also going to swatch the glitter colors that I happen to have and give you guys a good idea. We're not going to play around with the different tips too much. I'll pull an example of each just so you guys can see how those differ from some of their other offerings. And we're going to do our swatching on black paper. That way it'll stand out really nice and bright and opaque, because that's one of the real big selling points for Posca markers. Also, after these have had a chance to dry, I'm going to test them with some alcohol marker and with some water to see if they're marker and waterproof once dry. So I am really excited to do that for you guys. So before we can swatch, we're going to have to unbox. And these have been taped, so I need to grab myself an X-Acto blade to get these open. So what was sent to me was the main 15 color box. This is pretty much identical to the very first Posca box I ever bought. And I think it's got 15 very serviceable colors. And then they also sent the pastels, or I guess I should say I also purchased the pastels. I also received a silver and a gold. Now this isn't the entire color range, believe it or not. Posca also makes some jewel tones and some olive drabs. So I'm going to grab some of those so I can swatch them for you guys so you guys can get a good idea of what the whole color, or what the majority of the color range looks like. So this isn't a paid endorsement. I actually happen to really just like Posca markers, and it was time to replace and augment my original set. So that is why I did it. Usually I would go down to Jerry's Artorama where I can buy these open stock from their display. That's where I got most of the unusual colors from. So what I would recommend is if you're new to Posca, I would get the base set. And then, depending on how much you enjoy using these, how much you see yourself using these, I would get some of the other more unusual colors open stock. So I don't think any of these colors are in either of these sets. Usually when you buy Posca markers open stock, they come shrink wrapped like this. And Poscas do require a little bit of prep work to get started, but it's not too bad. You're definitely going to want to have maybe a scratch sheet of paper, or you're going to want to work on a surface you can either throw away or is easy to clean up. So I'm working on Teflon permeated craft sheets just because they clean up super easily with water or with alcohol marker. Okay, so to get your Poscas prepped and ready for first use, you can see we have this pale lily white nib. So what you're going to do is you're going to depress it a few times. Well, really what you want to do first is you want to shake it really good. Fortunately, our ink flow hadn't really started yet. Then you want to depress it a few times till you get the color flowing. And sometimes it's more times than you would think, especially for first use. But you'll see it starts creeping up into the nib, and then just one or two more pumps is necessary. And you may want, in order to facilitate the ink flow, you may want to store them for the time being. Just while you're first getting them started, you may want to store them standing up like this. Now usually with any types of markers, I store my markers horizontally, and that means we get even ink flow, so the nib never dries out, and so it doesn't dry out into the back of the pen. So we're gonna do the silver, shake a. And that shaky sound means there's a roller ball in there, which helps mix the paint, which means we're not just going to get the paint binder, we're never just going to get the paint coming out in clumps. We're always going to get a good mixture as long as we shake it properly and as long as the markers themselves are not running dry. So what I'm going to do, now that I've demonstrated that, is I'm going to get the rest of these started. But what we can do before then is we can do a little bit of swatching. So while these dry, I have some tips for you guys. You can see that some of these are not quite as opaque as we would like. If you let Posca dry fully, you can apply subsequent layers so you can build up that opacity. You can also see some of these, they were very wet on application. It is raining outside, so the barometric pressure is a little bit different, but they may also be running low. So when you notice that your markers are more prone to dripping and to getting goopy on your paper, it's a good time to replace them. So next, I'm going to swatch the glitter colors. We'll do that in time lapse as well. So because Poscas are water-based and most of them have a compressed fiber tip, with the exception of the brush Poscas, you want to be sure that you allow them to dry fully before you layer another layer. And the reason for that is, given the fact that you're dealing with water, something that can be very slow to evaporate from paper, and you're also dealing with a fiber tip that can be really harsh and scratchy, you're going to be prone to tearing up your paper surface if you don't give it time to dry. I don't have all 6 of the fluorescents, but I do have 4 of them. So I'll swatch those for you as well. These are in the larger PC 5mm size. So we do have the larger bullet nib. These are good for coloring or filling in larger areas quickly, but it can be kind of challenging to get into really small detailed areas. You guys saw the laser cut wooden charm I had earlier, and that thing has all these small sort of laser cut indentations, and it can be really difficult to fill in those tiny areas using this larger bullet nib size. So we just finished swatching the 15 color Posca set. Now we have the 7 color pastel set. Poscas come in a range of different tip options. Most of them do feature a replaceable or flippable nib like we talked about earlier. I don't have any of the chisel nibs or any of the really large ones just because that's not really something I would use a whole lot. But I do have the larger, slightly larger bullet nib. I do have some of the finer point ones. I have some of the really tiny pin type ones, and I also have one or a few of the brush type ones, and I wanted to demonstrate how the different tips work for you guys. So the larger bullet nib is pretty much how you would expect, just a larger version of the bullet nib. This is a finer point, and it's not a plastic nib, it's a fiber nib, but it comes to a really fine point. So that could be good for detail work. Then we have the PC1MR, so it's the pin type. And you can still depress the front, depress the, are you seriously dead? What the heck-a-rooney? Let me grab one of these that isn't dead. So something else that's kind of cool about Posca is that if your nibs run dry but you know there's still ink in the barrel, you can actually soak the fiber style nibs in water to kind of reactivate that, which if these were acrylic based, once the acrylic dried, your nib would be, you could soak them in alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, and that can remove some of the acrylic. But water wouldn't do the trick because acrylic contains plasticizers, and those are not water soluble once dry. Those are alcohol soluble once dry. So that's another reason why I wouldn't necessarily refill these with acrylics. Got a couple of these because I have a feeling the pen type has a tendency to dry up really easily because they're so small, they're so fine. And here's a white one, so this one could be good for adding just small details. And then finally we have the brush type. Now the brush type, they don't advance in the front, and they also have an interesting spring-loaded cap to help ensure you get a good seal. You remove this little plastic bit from the back. You could throw it away, I keep mine. And there is a button on the back, so let's do it without advancing it. So some ink, not a whole lot. Give it a couple of pumps. Still not a whole lot of ink, but this could be good for covering a larger area without abrading your paper surface too much. And then of course we have the larger chisel and poster board size Posca markers. So I'm applying my second layer of color, and you can see we got some pooling over there. I would recommend you don't just leave it, but instead take a piece of paper towel, fold it up real small, and just kind of dab it in to soak up some of that excess. If you leave it pooled like that, it's going to end up cracking a lot when it dries, which is going to give an uneven surface texture that honestly you're probably not looking for. So as you're applying your Posca marker, you'll probably notice that 2 coats look better than 1. And you may notice that if you scribble your marker back and forth like that, you start to tear up your paper surface. So I recommend, even after it's dried, I recommend you try to keep it going in one direction as much as possible so you're not like abrading the paper surface by scrubbing back and forth. So next I want to demonstrate a blending technique for Poscas. So usually Poscas are going to work better in terms of blending if you're using a coated surface. So like a canvas that's been primed, some wood that has like a primer on it, plastic, anything that's going to kind of resist the paint just a little bit so it doesn't dry so quickly. But that's okay. We're going to do the test here on this black paper. So the thing about Posca is it is water soluble. Now, once it's dried, it's fairly water resistant, but you don't have to take my word for it. We're going to test that before the end of the video. You guys may have also noticed that some of these colors definitely need multiple layers in order to give their best. So one of the ways you can blend Posca marker is just with plain water. You can also apply it, this one's a little bit drippy, you can apply it to a non-porous surface like this, and you can pick it up with a paintbrush and paint with it, which I see a lot of artists doing, and it gives you kind of like a gouache effect without it actually being gouache. So this may be a little bit easier for some people to control. So another way you can blend Poscas is to do the exact opposite of what I told you earlier, where we allow our prior layers to dry, and you can just go in wet into wet, and you're going to get kind of a diffuse blend like that, but you're also going to tear up your paper surface, which is why that works a little bit better on coated paper surfaces. Another method is to apply your layer, allow it to dry, and then for your next layer, you blend it back out. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll demonstrate that for you guys. Okay, so that's not fully dry, but it's dry enough. And we're going to move our marker in one direction so we don't just completely tear up the paper. And then you can blend it back out with your prior color. But really, I don't try to do too much blending with Poscas because I kind of like the graphic look I can get by building up those colors and by having starker transitions. So we can scribble a little bit onto our non-porous work surface, pick it up and kind of paint with it. So before I say goodbye to you guys, I do have a couple tests I want to do because I've been curious about it for a while and I've just been putting off actually doing it. I want to see if these are alcohol proof and waterproof. So I'm going to switch over to a white paper and we'll test on that. So here we have a piece of white Bristol, and I'm going to do a few different tests because sometimes a dye can be more reactive than other dyes. So we're going to try a few different ones. We're going to do one of the fluorescents. Let's do one of the metallics. And what's nice about the Bristol is it doesn't really have any tooth to it, so it's way less likely to get torn up. I was testing out Posca markers on Stonehenge Aqua Black paper and it basically chewed up that paper. So you want to avoid looser woven kind of papers or looser types of papers. So even mold made watercolor papers that are cotton rag might not be a good fit for Posca. I like Poscas, but they're not perfect for everything. And then let's do magenta. So what I want to do is I want to let, gonna have to clean that one up. I want to let it dry fully. So I'm going to give it 10 minutes to dry, and then we're going to come back with water and an alcohol marker just to see how reactive they are. I've had good experiences with Poscas in terms of not being too water reactive, but this is going to be a nice test to kind of answer those final questions. So I want to talk about some Posca alikes. These are not Poscas, but they handle very similarly to Poscas. You can use them with your Posca markers, and they may be cheaper depending on where you can find them. First, we have the Zig Posterman. This is a calligraphy one, and it has one of the smaller chisel tips. So this uses the same kind of paint that a Posca marker does, probably a very watery tempera paint, and it has poster in the name. Poster paints are usually tempera based paints, very water soluble, low toxicity. So these are made by Kuretake Zig. You may have a slightly harder time finding them, but they promise to be water-based pigment ink, so I have a feeling Posca is the same thing. Waterproof, fade-proof, non-blurring, and non-blotting ink overwrites after dry. So that means you can put another layer on top of it, and the prior layer isn't going to reactivate. So you can use these for layering. Then there is the Art Line Poster Marker, and it says right on the barrel that it's tempera paint. It's acid-free, water-based, archival quality pigment ink, arts and craft project sign writing, and graphics marker, and it's ideal for use on most surfaces, including paper, glass, etc. It's water-based, waterproof, and fade-proof, and it's made by Sachihara and made in Malaysia. And I have a feeling this is pretty much the same material, same solution on the interior as the Posca and the Posterman, which is why I keep saying over and over, I probably wouldn't refill it with acrylic ink. I'd be real curious to see if those acrylic filled Poscas are still working in a year. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Acrylic is water soluble while still wet, so you know, there is some hope for that. But generally, I think it's best to probably not try to refill them. And I know that Arteza makes a paint marker. I haven't tried it yet. They also make chalk markers, but their paint marker may be similar to this. I I don't know whether it's tempera based or acrylic based, but I'm sure those of you in the comments who have experience with the Arteza markers will let me know. Okay, so these have had a chance to dry for a little over 10 minutes. We're going to start with the alcohol marker. And as you can see, at least with the fluorescent and with the gold, okay, obviously it's not going to show up with the yellow, with the purple, and then with the magenta. So you do get color movement with alcohol markers. Next, I want to try just some water. If you really scrub at it, you do get some movement and some reactivation. So as I mentioned earlier, acrylics, when they're dry, they're pretty much fully waterproof. And they're going to be alcohol soluble. Tempera, having a water base, usually can be reactivated. So I wouldn't call Poscas fully waterproof. I wouldn't necessarily use Poscas, say, for like rock painting on rocks that I was going to put on out in the garden without sealing them first. So when I seal Posca, if I'm looking for gloss, I'll use either of these. Obviously, this one hasn't been used in a long time and it's probably out of commission. But I find that these bond to pretty much anything, especially this one, and they create basically a waterproof seal without reactivating the Posca. So that's about it for me and Posca markers. That's a brief overview of just about everything I know, most of my experience. I'm gonna link a bunch of my Posca marker tutorials down in the description below if you're looking for some fun projects or if you're looking for ideas. And if I happen to learn anything new, I'll definitely do a follow-up video. And I definitely ask Posca to please consider offering refills for these so that people can use the actual refills and we can save some money instead of having to buy new Posca markers every time one of them runs dry, or try to refill them with something that may end up damaging our art, may end up damaging the marker, and just end up wasting materials if it doesn't work out. So if you guys have anything you want to share regarding Posca markers, you can do so down in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing back from you guys. And if you enjoy videos like this one and you're not a subscriber, why not hit that bell notification? I have all sorts of reviews, tutorials, and overviews like this Posca marker overview here on the channel. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I will see you guys again really soon. And if you're looking for something fun to do with your Saturday nights, every Saturday evening, I run a art workshop live here on YouTube. This is a recent piece that we completed together. So I walk you through the whole process and we use all sorts of different fun art materials. So hopefully you guys will check that out. If you hit the bell notification, it'll let you know when a live stream has gone live.